Hi, and welcome to HUDL Up, the podcast from HUDL, where we're holding space for real stories, shared power, and collective change. HUDL works alongside young people, organizations, and communities to create fairer systems and better opportunities, not just for young people, but with them. And this podcast is where those stories come to life. Each episode will hear from young leaders, practitioners, and partners who are reshaping the way decisions are made and how programs are designed. Together, we'll explore what it takes to build equitable partnerships, share power meaningfully, and create change that lasts. We believe that when young people are involved at every stage, from design to decision-making to delivery, systems become fairer and communities become stronger. So, let's huddle up and get started with today's episode, which is from myself, Keji Okeowo, Director of HUDL, and the wonderful Floree. So, Floree, let's kick off with talking about before HUDL, like where were we, what brought us to this world of youth leadership and social change. I'm happy to start off. So my whole foray into like social change started when I was at school. I was very early on really curious about how my voice could shape the way our school worked, how the school day worked, how students got to shape the way that we learned. And I was really fortunate when I was at school to have teachers who recognized that in me and saw that I was motivated and were willing to kind of give me the resources in order for me to actually have my say. And then when I left secondary school, I went off to college, and I realized when I was at college that there weren't any opportunities outside of sports and outside of studying to actually use my voice in any way to kind of shape the college community or to shape the community around the college. And then I was really fortunate because a friend of mine introduced me to an organization called Citizen, Positive Inner City Vibes. We partnered with another organization called Tolerance and Diversity, and their makeup was exactly the same as ours in that it was essentially all young people. And we had like one adult who was there to kind of like support the work that we were doing. I think the thing that was really cool about that space was that it was about moving away from young people just being consulted and young people actually identifying the solutions within their own like community, and then young people then being resourced to then put those solutions into action. And that is really where my journey started. And since then, since the wonderful ripe old age of like, I want to say 17 when I joined Citizen, I have been working with and for young people, both full-time and also in other startups. But now HUDL is 8 years old and we're just growing. We're growing, we're getting stronger, we're learning more, we're understanding the challenges, and I'm really looking forward to like being able to share those stories in this podcast. What about you, Floree?
Yeah, it's really interesting to reflect back on my journey in the youth space. And similar to you, I've been on this journey for 22 years. Feels like a long time. For me, I went to high school and I wasn't really academic and I wasn't really fitting into school. And my biggest savior was this organization called AT4T, which was Association of Teenagers for Teenagers. So I decided to join, curious to see where it will take me. And it took me on a whole big journey because all of a sudden I started getting involved with organizing a big theater festival for young people across the country. And I had to design and facilitate and host spaces and learn English because we went international at some point. And I started feeling part of this community. I kind of started shaping myself and who I was and building my confidence. And similar to your story, this was mainly youth-led, but we had two teachers that were kind of creating the container for us to deliver what we wanted to deliver. And if I think back, those teachers were the ones that showed me who I can be and what I can do and what are my strengths, because I used to be quite shy. And then I shifted into doing public relations and communications for this space and for young people. And it's been an interesting journey for me, especially coming from a working class background and coming to the UK as an immigrant and trying to find myself in this whole mix. But I already came with a set of skills and a set of beliefs in myself that I can do things bigger than myself, even if life is hard and you have to work really hard. And from there, I moved to another youth association called ISAC, which was all around peace and humankind potential and bringing young people from all across the world to really look at how can we create a world that is flourishing for all of us, where we strive, that is equal. And it put me in a lot of spaces and places where I really started connecting with different cultures. I became aware of cultural diversity and different backgrounds as well. And again, for me, it was this practical learning as well, because as I said, I was struggling academically and I don't even know where I would be now without that support and being able to find my own authenticity into this. And as I said, it hasn't always been easy. There were loads of difficult moments, and I had to figure out many things on my own because at times I didn't have the right support, and especially coming to a new country. But it kind of led to then moving into this social and environmental space in the UK, starting working with HUDL and starting working with similar movements and developing this passion to help young people that come from similar backgrounds or from really even more difficult backgrounds, that they don't have to go through all the pain. They don't have to go through all that struggle. They don't have to have imposter syndrome in these spaces, that we can actually create containers for them to find themselves and not have to go through the pain I had to go to get where I am now. And for me, that's a big passion to fast track young people that come from marginalized backgrounds, disadvantaged backgrounds, that haven't had opportunities, that might have lost confidence in themselves and really be who they want to be, whilst also reimagining how we can live and how can we make the world a better place, because we do live in a difficult time with a lot of complex environmental, political, social issues. I don't want to even get started on that. So we do need the future leaders to rethink the way they are and bring kindness and love and a different way of relating to each other and community. And that's why I love working with HUDL, because we're constantly being experimental and looking at how can we bring our lived experience, but also what can we continuously learn from our young people, because I'm also learning a lot, even if I am a facilitator in this space.
Would you say there's a specific moment or experience that made you realize that systems needed to involve young people differently?
For me, it's again my lived experience in the UK, because I held the imposter syndrome for a very long time. So although I managed to somehow eventually enter social spaces and environmental spaces, and I started working with influential organizations and influential people and high net worth individuals, I always questioned, why am I here? And English is not my language. And I don't know how to use big words. And I have an accent. And who am I? Because I haven't been educated in the same way. And I don't come from a privileged school. And it was hard. And it was bringing me a lot of anxiety. And it was affecting me in many different shapes and forms. And there was one moment, part of an event I was running, where I had to speak in front of 200 people. And I knew there were some politicians in the space and CEOs of large companies and some of my friends and just loads of people. And I couldn't sleep for 2 days and I was mortified. And public speaking coach came to speak to me. and said, you don't have to think about who's in the room. You just have to focus on your message, and you have to bring who you are. And I remember that moment vividly. And I remember that moment when I realized, because I was putting myself down for a very long time, because I was always the kind of working class person that couldn't have the same conversations with my colleagues, and I always felt out of place. And it was that moment when I realized, actually, I am worthy of being here. And if anything, I bring a lot of value, because I know how difficult it is to be an immigrant, and I know how difficult it is to try to find a job, and I know how difficult it is to not have money to pay for your bus ride. And I started getting power in that and realizing that I'm not below anyone here. And if anything, I had to fight a lot more. I had to push myself a lot more. And I think when that clicked, that's when I entered in my power of, okay, let's go. And it was a powerful, for sure, moment for me.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think, when I think about that question, I was like, was there like a specific moment for me where it hit? And there is a moment that kind of comes to mind. But before I talk about that, I think for me, the experience that I've had that made me realize that systems need to involve young people is, I mean, for context, I'm an older sister, I've got my two sisters, and I realized that like there wasn't a lot of opportunities for me, and I wanted to create opportunities for my sisters, and I wanted them to like feel this sense of ownership or rightfulness being in spaces, and just feeling like they had a voice, because we at home we didn't really have that option. Like, I had a strict parent growing up, and it's not until I was at school and I joined the school council, and I had like two teachers who were really like keen to support me, that I realized that my voice had power and that I could shape things. And I wanted to create those moments for my sisters. I think that was definitely like an inspiration for me. But I would say like the moment where I realized that like I have the power to shift things and to shape things was when I was working for a housing association. Not necessarily working, but like I was on a board for a housing association in Hackney, and they had this like conference near Dalston, and I was asked to join the panel. And I was just talking, like they asked questions, I was giving answers, and I was saying what I could see. And I was getting such positive like responses from people. And then when I came off the panel, everyone was like, oh, like, we can't believe that you brought that to the table, and thank you so much for like saying that point. And like, if it was us, we wouldn't have been able to say it so directly, and it just wouldn't have been said. It wouldn't have been brought into the room. Like, well done. And I was just telling the truth. I was just saying like the things that I experience every day, and the disadvantages that I see around me all the time. And that's when I realized that, well, actually, as a young person, there is power in that, because one, sometimes people don't expect much from you, and they don't expect you to say the things that need to be said. And then when you do, they sit up and they listen. And I think that was for me that the turning point. That was definitely a turning point for me.
I do see a pattern around also getting that community feedback and the exposure as well. Because in the experience I was talking about, when it was the big moment for me that young people have power and young people from certain backgrounds can still have power, after the event I was talking about, people came to me saying how powerful it was, how inspirational it was, what a great speaker I was, what a great host I was. And I was not aware of that. And if I wouldn't have received that feedback, maybe I would have never known or discovered that I can do this, and that my voice matters, and that I can challenge, and that I'm not the only person that thinks in a certain way, because I did have to challenge in some traditional spaces as well. And to realize the power of speaking up reinforces and shows that we can shift things and we can stretch perspectives and we can widen people's approaches on something, but that it's important to have that ally that can be behind you at times when you don't have that confidence to say you're doing amazing, keep on going, and we will follow. And I think that's where the passion and the work we hold at Huddle comes back, because we want to be these containers for young people, and we don't want young people to take 10 years to get into that space. We want them to be able to share their opinions from the get-go and know that it matters and know that they can influence policies and the world and politics and make the change they want to see in the world.
Yeah. So knowing like, I guess, where we both started before Huddle, what brought you to Huddle?
Well, you brought me to Huddle, and we met through a different organization that we were working with called Choreo. I was working there. Keji came as an associate, and we collaborated on a few projects. We worked on a project called Charity Works, which was all around bringing young people into the social sector, especially into the charity work, because we knew it's very difficult to have a paid job into the sector. And then we worked together on a project called Change 100, which was all around working with young people with chronic illnesses and mental health illnesses, as well as disability, to get into employment. And it was a program across sector. And then we also worked together on a program called Create, which was very close to our heart because we were working with young people who have had cancer diagnosis. So we started exploring and seeing the nuances and the complexities that young people face, and I guess the social and economic and political aspects of this. So we just got along and kind of found a flow in the way we work. And then I got a call from Keji saying, oh, I have this project with Esme Fairbairn and it would be really interesting to collaborate. Would you like to be an associate for Huddle? And just to say, it also came in a time where we just entered lockdown and I lost all my work because all my workshops were face to face. It was definitely a moment of crisis for me. So just to acknowledge as well that it was a savior moment for me to get that call and say, hey, there's this opportunity, because I didn't have any safety blanket. And I knew if I'm not going to find some work very quick, I would have to go back to Romania and I wouldn't be able to stay in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there was like a few things going on with you, but yeah, I think the work that we did on the programs that you just shared, like that definitely gave me a lot of confidence in terms of you and I being aligned in like our values, in terms of like how we work with young people and the principles that we follow in the way that we work. I do want to say at this point that like Huddle is founded by myself and Yoko Kusnama and Shanaz Ali, and when we kind of convened to sort of set up Huddle, it was very much on the basis that we wanted to, we knew we wanted to work with young people, and we knew that we wanted to support young people to develop both on a professional and a personal level, but we didn't quite know exactly what that would look like. And we knew that we didn't want to focus in on like a specific tool, because I don't think that there was one tool that fits. And then we kind of just got to that point where we were like, we want to work with young people based on how young people need us to work with them. And also we want to work with organizations who recognize the value of working in partnership with young people. And over time, that's kind of really sort of molded into us working in this sort of niche space, I guess, of young people being involved in grant making and decision making and co-design. And I think for me, it's always been about creating spaces where young people can thrive, and a space where young people can make mistakes, and a space where young people can learn, and also where we can kind of like bring joy into people's lives. and also bring joy into like organizations and organizational cultures. And I feel like we're starting to do that in the partnerships that we're working on. The next question then, Floree, I don't know if you want to add anything about, like, do you feel like there is any principles that drive the way that we work right now?
I guess there's several layers to the principles. On one hand, it's the humanity. And that has been really, really important to me because as a young person coming to the UK and trying to enter these professional spaces, I also realized that I was losing myself. I also realized that when it came to the social and environmental space, that people were burnout and there was a lot of grief and challenge and sadness, and it's really, really, really difficult. And it's really difficult to be at the front line. And it's really, really, really difficult to constantly have to fight the system and find solutions and shift perceptions and bring awareness. And then to notice that things are not moving in a way you would hope to. And so for me, it was really important to bring authenticity and humanity and joy back to who we are and being able to be unapologetic about our thoughts and feelings and desires and the future we want to reimagine. But at the same time, I feel in terms of our principles, we always try to bring systems thinking, critical thinking, innovation to constantly question why. Why are we doing things in this way? Why are young people seen in this way? Why do adults, and when I say adults, I refer to professionals, why should they be paid 6 times more than a young person just because they have a certain role? Why are we expecting young people to do work for free just because they're young people and they need to grow? Why can't we see lived experience as a key vital piece to the change we're trying to create? Why are we not listening to what people have to say? Why do we not create diverse spaces where we bring people from different backgrounds to share and understand each other and where we're coming from and what cultures do we bring and what we hold? And for me, that is the essence of HUDL. It's about the container I was talking about earlier in terms of supporting young people to be consultants to different organizations and spaces and find their inner leadership and their inner voice and go on their journey wherever they need to go. But it's also about constantly questioning why, who are we here to serve? Now we can influence money in the grant making space. Why do we fund some organizations over others? Why do we fund some leaders over others? How do we do this? How do we make decisions? Why are we making so many assumptions? And why do we still go in the same way we were going 50 years ago about leadership? So there is this essence in HUDL around constantly involving, constantly understanding what's happening and reacting to our times, because things are moving fast and things are evolving and changing constantly, especially with what's happening with technology at the moment. And so our principle is also to keep up with the times and keep on shape shifting to really be able to hold this space where young people can thrive and young people can bring their voices and where young people can collaborate with people of all ages and where we're not segregated, but we realize that we are a community and a human population, that we all have to survive together, and therefore age doesn't matter, because we do have to listen to our children and we do have to listen to the young people because they hold parts of wisdom that maybe we forgot as we got older, and things that we have to unlearn and rewild our minds in many ways, because as we went into this journey of work and living and surviving, we've also shaped ourselves and blocked possibilities. And I feel young people and children can unlock that and help us unlearn some ways that we take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have put it any better. So thank you for sharing that, Floree. I'm just wondering, like, what's something that surprised you or surprised us since starting Huddle? And I guess for you, Floree, since joining Huddle, what surprised you in this work, in the way that we work? And I think for me, the thing that has surprised me is just how we have grown in like the last 8 years and the range of young people that we work with across the UK and the types of conversations and decisions that they are taking and making and kind of working on alongside organizations that haven't traditionally worked with young people. Maybe they kind of wanted to, but this is like their first time doing it, or they've maybe worked with young people in the past and they've learned a lot in terms of like what works for them as an organization and what doesn't, but they're really thinking about like how to make this process really, participatory. I think those are things that definitely have surprised me in like since starting Huddle. But I would also say, and this is something I'm hoping we get to talk about more in the in our podcast, is the kind of the back end of everything, and kind of like starting off from being pretty much myself, Shanaz and Yoku in the early days, to having a team of associates and having various collectives and boards and panels, and just realizing the amount of processes that need to be put in place and the time that is required to sort of manage the kind of the back end and the business end of it all, and thinking about scaling and how to make sure that we continue to ensure that the experience is the same, if not better, and kind of maintaining the quality in terms of like how we support and how we engage young people and how we engage our partners. Whilst it's been an opportunity, it's also been a challenge. What would you say have been like any surprises for you? Do you see anything in that?
There have been many surprises for me, and I can't believe it's been 8 years. It feels like a lifetime, but also it feels it flew very quickly. One of the biggest surprises was me being in a space where I can influence money. And it's a big surprise because I used to have a very difficult relationship with monies. I was an angry activist and hating on corporations and rich people and billionaires, and always stayed away from the philanthropy space because I just felt, oh, you're just a bunch of people with loads of money who are trying to pretend you're doing good, but you're still continuing your good life whilst a lot of people are suffering in the world. So it's not something I considered, and the fact that we started working in the grant making space without planning it, and that we've been growing in this space and experimenting in this space, it taught me the value of lived experience and of people coming in to really voice their concerns, the troubles, what they need, what their communities need, their friends, their siblings. And this was a big surprise. The other surprise was the willingness of organizations to really work and really find out how can they be better. How can they bring the stories in? How can they think about their processes in a different way? How can they give power to young people to make decisions? And the willingness was an amazing surprise for me because, as I said, I was making a lot of assumptions from a place of pain and anger. I also echo what you said. Huge surprise to work with the young people that we've been working with, and it brings so much joy, and I built so many friendships and connections and community, and I could have never expected this in a million years, that it would go in this way. But then the other thing that surprised me is because organizations have been willing to put the right resources and time in place, we've been able to really test and innovate and push boundaries to the point where funds have been fully decided by our young people, where our young people designed some really unique funds that now are shaping the sector. I was yesterday in a meeting where we were reflecting on the Involving Young People Fund, which we will talk about more in a future episode. And we could hear how our partners organizations and how our young people changed, how they changed personally, but also how the organizations changed, and how now they're putting more money into youth voice, more money into supporting young people. They're bringing youth participation at the heart of it, and they're redlining as well. They say we can't continue doing work without young people at the forefront. And this is a huge surprise, and it makes me so happy to see that my work has such an impact and influence in ways I could have never imagined. So I guess there's a lot in there. And then finally, a big surprise was some of our young people exiting our programs. We've been putting in place different processes to hear how the experience has changed them. And we had recently, we're just wrapping up a fund with Cobb Foundation on a fund called Future Collectives Fund, second focused on supporting young people that have had experience with the criminal justice system. And again, we will talk about this in a future episode. But part of that, we also had 4 young people that were finishing their terms with us. They've been working with us for 3 years. And the emotion and the power that came up to realize how this experience is truly, truly changing our journeys and people's lives is, again, something I didn't expect, because many times we focus on the outcomes and we say, oh, we shared power and we gave this amount of £1,000,000 in the grant making space and we're supporting all these organizations. But sometimes we forget how our work truly changes, and it goes back to when this kind of work changed me and helped me be where I am today. So it's a beautiful realization to see this, and it also gives me power to continue this work, and it gives me inspiration because I know what I'm putting my time into, even if at times it's not as straightforward or as easy, it does have true impact. And I always think about all the spaces our young people go into where they take this legacy and they keep on pushing the systems. And I know a lot of our young people will be really important leaders. They are important leaders, but I know they're going to run some very important spaces in the future. Like, I fully believe that. I have no question. And so I'm always curious to witness them, how they grow, where they go. And for me, the most beautiful surprise is to see them in their fullness and to realize, wow, they're doing 1,000 times better than I could do. And they're speaking so well and they're so amazing. For example, last week, one of our young person did a training. They're an alumni with us, but they did a training with another group of young people with our Mission 44 Youth Advisory Board. And I was so proud, and I was telling myself, I couldn't have delivered this session in this way. And the part as well, when you see the young people being 1,000 times better than you would ever be, that also brings me a lot of joy, because it makes me question, how do we prepare the new generation, and how can we be humble and let go of our ego and prepare or enable young people to be better than us and better than we would ever be, and then to keep on building and to keep on shifting systems.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you in terms of like the statement about like working without ego. I think that that's definitely something that, yeah, I feel like I've gone into rooms and I've said, look, there's no ego here, there's no agenda here, and I think it's so important for us to kind of start from that position because I think it allows for like open space for challenge, for conversation, for design, for everything. But yeah, I feel like you just said so much in terms of like some of the stuff that you said for it. I'm like, oh yeah, actually that is such a cool thing, and it has been a surprise. So I guess a couple more questions then for us. So our work involves changing how organizations work with young people, and not just what opportunities they offer. So what does that actually look like in practice? What does the behind the scenes of HUDL look like? I'm just hearing like the voice of Tian right now saying it's Keji crashing out behind her desk.
Well, there's a lot to say, and we probably speak for days and
I feel like
days.
this could be a whole episode just dedicated to what is the behind the scenes.
So the behind the scenes is all sorts, but I did want to touch upon something. When we talk about the ego, I was also thinking about our relationship and the humility and trust has been really important because we've been working together for 8 years. And I don't know if I remember 2 times where we had some tension. And even that was nothing that I would be worried about. And I think the flow of that and creating space for other people to work in this way as well is really, really important. And it helps to hold the backbone. And this is something I try to hold when we work with teams, when we work with our associates as well. How can we constantly be good with ourselves? How can we be kind with each other? How can we understand when little mistakes happen or there's an admin thing or we forgot something? Things always happen, but it's okay. How can we move on and what can we learn from this? And how can we ensure that it doesn't affect us? But I guess in terms going back to your question around working with organizations and how do we work with organizations, there's many process things that we can talk about, and maybe that's for another episode. But for me, at the heart of everything is the fact that organizations are people, and they are people that come from all kind of places and spaces, and we're lucky enough to work with a lot of charities and foundations and grant-making organizations where we know that these people are there because they want to change something. They see the need of creating a better world. So we know that we're starting from a similar point. We might be of different ages, experiences, we might have had different education, and we have different styles and ways of working. But what sits at the core for me is the idea that we need to go back to being human, and we need to let go of the masks that we sometimes put on when we have to be a representative of an organization. And that actually, in order to do really good intergenerational work and youth participation, the only thing you have to do is bring the people in the room together, make it fun, bring some tools in, some creative tools where you can listen to each other, where you can share, where you can bring some big questions, but you can also bring small questions. Like this week, we had staff members from ESME together with our Involving Young People Collective, and we just asked, if you were a flower today, what flower would you be? And that's a very small intervention, but it's what brings humanity. And actually, we've learned so much about people's favorite flowers and how they feel and why they feel in a certain way, and why is someone a sunflower and why is someone a thistle in the same day, and how can we respect that maybe some people are not feeling good in the space. And what I also learned through this process is that it's not about just saying, oh, we're going to bring the young people, because young people feel quite abstract to a lot of staff members and organizations when they think, oh, young people, there's this imagined persona of who these young people are. But as soon as you start bringing them together and they socialize and you ask them some questions and they start doing some explorations, their personalities, their authenticity comes to life. And a lot of the staff members get their inspiration, their joy. They remember why they are there, because they meet young people, but they also start seeing the value. Wow, it's so interesting you said this. I've never even thought about this. Wow, this young person really went into this. And also I think our staff members are starting to realize that our young people are multi-dimensional beings, as we all are. And so they shouldn't just bring them in because they're young people and they talk about funding for young people, but they're passionate about 1 billion things and they have knowledge about 1 billion things, and they can bring true perspectives in the mix that they wouldn't even consider, and they find really valuable.
Just to talk on that, I think it's also that thing of like, especially when you're talking about like not necessarily sort of seeing young people in this abstract way, right? I think it's when you see young people as individuals that you can learn from, right? That you can relate to, and that, you know, you can kind of see value in their lived experience, see value in their professional experience, because we work with a lot of young people who are doing incredible things even before they engage with us at HUDL. I think that that's like so important. And I think the other thing as well is that like, it's those moments of connection that helps to build trust, that helps to kind of like push boundaries in the long run. I just wanted to bring that in because I just feel like that's so important. And I think sometimes I often struggle with when we have spaces where people are like, you know, how do you work with young people versus how you work with staff? And I'm like, well, everybody is an individual. Everyone is a human being. Like, we work with them in a way that is going to ensure that they feel comfortable, that they can engage, and that they can be their true self, and they don't have to have a mask on in the space. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. Something that you said kind of triggered me wanting to say that, Floree. So if you kind of look back to, I guess, the beginning of the 8 years, is there anything that you wish we did differently, or wish you told yourself at the very beginning of that journey about this work?
It's an interesting question, but I'm also realizing I wouldn't have known everything I know now. We didn't even know the space we're entering and where it's going to take us. And I think there's something about following the flow and following the direction that our community is shaping, and following what we feel and what we need and what we want to see more in the world. So I don't think I would have done differently. It all had to be in the way it was. I am now bringing a lot of that learning into our current projects and our future projects, because of course we learned so much, and I'm amazed how much I know, especially how much I know about grant making. I would have never imagined I would land in this space in a million years, and also realizing the power that it has. So there's a lot that I'm holding on to, and this is also something that changed me as a human, changed my life, is constantly teaching me. As I said, for me, our young people are my teachers as well, in different shapes and forms. And so I'm the kind of person that there's no regrets, not going back, should have, would have, keep on going, keep on applying, keep on growing. And I can see, looking back at how our work evolved, that we've been constantly changing our practice. And I think that's something about our philosophy that we try to instill within our work, but also in the organizations we work with. We do need to work iterative. There's no such thing as putting a 5-year plan and then trying to stick to it and doing the grind and pushing against doors that are not opening. That actually we need to have a goal, and then we need to flow with it, and we need to follow what's emerging, and we need to listen, and we need to change. And we need to constantly be aware, and we need to constantly identify the pain points and evolve, because we need to evolve as humanity as well. So this is just an exercise on how to live and how to be comfortable with the unknown, because there's no such thing as keeping with the same thing and doing things in the same way, because life is interchanging. We always change. I am not the person I was 8 years ago, and you're not the person that you were 8 years ago. And our young people are not the young people that we started. So we need to keep on building on that and
Yeah.
bring that in this space.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with everything. And I think if I had to tell myself something or something I wish I told myself, I think it would have been being more confident to kind of like push back with organizations when they kind of initially approach us and want to work with young people, and kind of just really sort of assuring them about the unknown is a cool place to be, and that we don't need to have like these very rigid structures. Because I think when I look back to the moments where things have been difficult in like our program delivery and our work, it's where we've been quite maybe rigid at the beginning, and then realizing that actually once young people are involved, once we have a better understanding of an organization's culture and we understand like we have a question that we're kind of pursuing, it all changes, right? And it's just about helping to give that assurance, even though like I don't know quite how we would do it, how we would have done that then. But yeah, I definitely would have leaned into sort of really being a bit more firm on like, let's work in the unknown. Let's work in the unknown. It's okay to work in the unknown. So finally, Floree, thinking about our journey so far, and there is many more years, I'm sure, to come. What would you say you're most proud of? What are you most proud of, and what are you excited for in the future?
I'm proud of us. I'm proud of our community. I'm really proud of our young people. As I said, I know we will hear from them, and I know they will continue this journey and this battle. I'm proud of our clients for opening up and trusting. I'm proud that we've been doing things that might be some firsts in the UK. I'm really proud to see our young people sharing power or holding power in such graceful and authentic ways. I'm proud of figuring participatory grant making and the fact that we piloted the Involving Young People Fund. I'm super proud of that, and I can't wait to share with the world the learning and the possibility. And then I guess what I'm excited for the future. I'm ready to go new places and spaces with HUDL as well. And I'm constantly thinking as rest as a revolutionary act and nature connection and health and well-being, because one thing I really want to hold us accountable to, and HUDL as an organization, I don't want to replicate the same capitalistic structures where we don't sleep and we constantly work and we constantly have to push and we constantly have to work on our self-improvement. And I do want to instill in our clients and our young people the fact that we do deserve to rest and feel joy and be in nature and reconnect to who we are as human, and that we don't need to work 80 hours a week to change the world, and that it's important to find our peace and our self-love and our community love and this deeper connection. And I've been talking to you about this as well, and I'm hoping they will come into shape. But I definitely want to create some retreat spaces for our young people when they can just rest and play, because a lot of our communities hold a lot of trauma and grief and difficulties and complicated life stories. And it's been really, 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 really hard. And it's very hard to still put it on them to have to solve this mess when they didn't create this mess. They just were born into this mess and to this inequality and all this polarization that is happening at the moment as well. And of course, in a capitalistic system, you're kind of questioning, well, where can we find money to allow young people from marginalized spaces to rest? But that's one of my biggest wishes, that we can create these spaces, because I think those are the spaces that will help us reimagine the way we want to live. And I'm going to leave you with this, that for me, the big question that I always ask, and I don't think we have yet defined at HUDL, I always ask, what is the life that we want to live? How do we want to live, and what is the society that we want to reimagine? Because if we don't know where we're going, how are we going to fight the fight? And that's why I want these reimagination spaces where our nervous system is relaxed and we're in our full power to be able to really think what is that ideal world that we know is possible, because we have to dream in order to be able to bring it into this world.
That is beautiful, Floree. I mean, we've had these conversations. We're going to continue having these conversations, right? And in a way, I'm thinking the podcast is going to be as iterative as our work. And we might bring that question in and ask people to share their thoughts, right? And to kind of see how that shapes the work, right? And the doing. For me, what I'm most proud of is that we're here, that we're doing the work, and we're learning, right? And we have the space to kind of to apply that learning as well. I'm also really proud of our community. I'm proud of all of our associates. I'm proud of all of our collectives and panels and boards, and for like the commitment that they bring to it and the care that they bring into the space and the care that they bring for each other. And I think I'm also really proud of like the memories that we're creating, not just for ourselves, but also for young people and also for our partners. And I hope, like, I think for me, the future is that we get to continue doing this, and we get to continue experimenting, and that we get to kind of share more of our stories. I think that we're so deep in the work, and we're so kind of focused on that we don't actually storytell. And that's one of the reasons why like this podcast has come about. And it's not because you and I want to do a podcast, because I know me and you are thinking, we do not want to be talking on a podcast, but the community has been asking for it. So I'm really looking forward to like sharing more stories and hearing directly from young people and hearing from our partners. This has been a really fun conversation for me, and it's been an interesting one, considering that we were like, what are we going to talk about? So I want to just say thank you to everyone for joining us for this episode of HUDL Up, our very first, and a huge thank you to you, Floree, for jumping on and sharing your story and your insights with me today. If anyone would like to learn more about HUDL, explore our work, or get in touch about involving young people in your programs, strategy, or organisation, you'll find links in the description of this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening now, and join us next time as we continue holding space for real stories, shared power, and collective change. See you next time, everyone.